Welcome back. This is Jeff Hix, curator of the Strange As It Seems archives and grandnephew of John Hix, who created Strange As It Seems back in the late 1920s. For today's episode, we're going to look at three amazing inventors whose names became synonymous with their inventions. Let's dive right in. In a recent episode, we featured the golden age of the airships in the 1920s and 1930s and recognized that this year is the 100th anniversary of the Goodyear Blimp. It reminded me of the strange story of Charles Goodyear. At 32 years of age, his hardware business had gone bankrupt and he was deep in debt. And that's when he became obsessed with gum elastic, or natural rubber as it was known, even though the rest of the world was kind of over it. It was the 1830s, about 100 years before Strange As It Seems was created, and rubber at the time was just a big yawner. No one knows exactly when rubber was discovered. One story has a Mayan woman walking through a forest, coming upon a tree that was crying and gathering up its tears, bringing those tears back to the Mayan chief. Some claim Christopher Columbus discovered rubber in the 1490s when he visited Haiti and watched the natives playing with a bouncing ball, which of course means that he didn't discover it if the Haitians were already playing with it. But anyway, in the 1830s, rubber was essentially hard to work with. It was stiff when it got cold, and when it got hot, it completely melted. As a self-taught chemist, Charles began experimenting with rubber for years and years. He ran out of money, pawned his wife's jewels, his family was reduced to utter poverty. He was shuttling in and out of debtors' prisons. The chemicals he was playing with were making him sick as he mixed rubber with about anything you could imagine. And when his son died of malnutrition, he couldn't even afford the coffin for the funeral. After 5 years of experimenting with rubber, really getting nowhere with it, one day he was mixing it with some sulfur and some lead, and he accidentally dropped it onto the stove. By the time he got it off the stovetop, he discovered that the rubber had become stiff, but was still supple. And what he had discovered was the process of vulcanization, named after the Roman god of fire. And in 1844, he was granted a patent, which he never made a dime off of. He died in 1860, a poor man, on the way to visit his dying daughter. And it wasn't until 1889 when John Dunlop of England manufactured the first commercially successful bicycle tire, and 9 years after that, when Frank Sieberling founded the Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, named after Charles Goodyear and his invention of the process of vulcanization 4 decades after his death. Strange as it seems. And I love this quote by Charles Goodyear. "The advantages of a career in life should not be estimated exclusively by the standard of dollars and cents, as is too often done. Man has just cause for regret when he sows and no one reaps." And for another inventor whose name became synonymous with their invention, we travel back again to the beginning of the 1800s when a new weapon appeared on the battlefield, one that a British officer had invented 20 years before and perfected with his own resources, which he called spherical case ammunition. This was a hollow cannonball filled with lead shot and a charge of gunpowder lit by a fuse, which would burst in midair. And in 1803, the British adopted this weapon for use in the Napoleonic Wars, and it proved frighteningly lethal. It shocked the hell out of the French soldiers, who initially thought the British had poisoned or sabotaged their own cannonballs. The weapon shaped history by playing a critical role in defeating Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo. The Duke of Wellington had ordered the new shell be kept a secret, even though it denied the inventor fame and honor. And in the War of 1812, it was the bombs bursting in air that Francis Scott Key watched and wrote about during the bombardment of Fort McHenry. And it wasn't until decades later that the fragments that burst from the shells that caused so much carnage became synonymous with the man who invented them. His name? Henry Shrapnel. Strange as it seems. And for the final story of this episode of inventors whose names became eponyms for their inventions, we go even further back in time to the 8th century, to a man you might think you've never heard of before, but you have. Muhammad ibn Musa al-Khwarizmi. Al-Khwarizmi was a mathematician, geographer, and an astronomer who around the year 820 worked in the House of Wisdom in Baghdad, which at the time was the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate. While there, he wrote a book explaining Hindu concepts in mathematics, including the symbols used in India for counting. 300 years after his death, the book was translated into Latin and became a radical new way for Europeans to count and do math. What the Europeans called Arabic numerals, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and on, including the radical new concept of zero, took another few hundred years to catch on before the Italian mathematician Fibonacci wrote a book advocating the use of Arabic numerals. So much for Roman numerals, unless, of course, you're counting Super Bowls. And if that wasn't enough, he wrote another book, the compendious book on completion and balancing, which in Arabic is the Kitab al-Jabr wal Mugabala. I'm probably massacring that, except for the middle word, Algebra, which became one of the main branches of mathematics we now know as algebra. As for al-Khwarizmi's name, how am I so sure you've heard it before? Because when it was translated into Latin, it became algoritmi, the word we now use as a set of instructions we give to a basic computer, all the way up to ChatGPT 3, the word we today know as algorithm. Strange as it seems.